Have you ever wondered what goes into your favorite brand's digital marketing strategy? I'm Terrah, the founder of TJ Creative Agency.
And I'm Audrey, the creative marketing director of TJ Creative Agency. Whether you're an influencer, a business owner, a content creator, or just an overall creative person, we'll teach you how to create the perfect social media strategy and build your brand online. Okay, well, welcome, Nikki, to the podcast. I would love if you could just give kind of a little who you are in your own words, elevator pitch type of thing.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm Nikki. I am the founder of Nikki Butler Media, and we're a podcasting production and PR agency. And we primarily serve business owners and influencers in the space. And we do everything from audio production to booking guests for you, to managing your content, your schedule, your calendar, lots of stuff.
Yeah.
So
a podcast, to get it out of the way, anyone that's listening, takes so much more work than people think it does. Like the editing, I think a lot of people are like, oh, you just sit down to record like once a week. And I'm like, oh my God, this takes up so much time for me. Even like just doing this podcast, I'm like, the editing, the reaching out to guests. Like also, if you want guests on your podcast, that's like a whole other thing, right? You have to like research the guests, look into like who you want, email them, make a good pitch, and then like write out your outline, whatever. Like it's just so much more work.
It's so much work. And honestly, like what kind of sparked my idea for this business was that I launched a podcast in 2020 with my good friend Becca. And I was really floored at all of the work that went into it. And I'm like, oh my God, are there like any companies out there that even like do this and help people out with all of this work? Because how can you like really have a podcast and support it and also work on your business and also be present in your personal life? And so it's kind of like how this was born.
I was going to ask what got you into doing it. You just saw that there like wasn't a company doing this and you were like, this is something that I'm sure people need.
Yeah, like I just felt like there was like a white space for podcasters who just really needed the support and like the sounding board too, because, you know, there are podcast editors and production companies out there. And then of course you could use a PR agency to do like any bookings or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I really felt like there was so much white space for like the support of managing the release schedule of every episode and like getting strategic about that. And how can you really like curate your content around what's happening in the world and like special events and holidays that come up, and like just being more intentional about how you go about creating your podcast and the content and the value that you're providing. Versus like just trying to catch up and get an episode out every week, you know?
So true. That's how we used to operate. And I finally was like, no, I have to go like further. It's so chaotic when you try and do everything like the week of. I'm like, I can't do that anymore. And like having a one-stop shop type of thing. Like, like you said, you can hire different people to do different assets of the podcast, but like who wants to hire 4 different people to do like one podcast?
Exactly. So that was kind of like the whole thought behind it. And then I know like a lot of, you know, people who come to us and they have like assistants or, you know, people kind of handling their podcast as a project, but they also have their hands dipped into so many other things. And they don't
So it's
really
nice to have someone just focus on your podcast and give it like the energy that it needs.
Exactly. And like, you know, you kind of have the edge of somebody who's just tapped into the industry and is always aware of like what's going on and trends and stuff like that.
True.
So,
That's true. I am curious. I didn't put this on the outline, but I'm curious about your podcast. I totally forgot that you guys launched a podcast because that was actually when I was interning at Homemade Social. That's when you guys were, I remember Becca like getting the microphones. Yeah, it was like right during that time. I remember her getting the mics and you guys were having, I think like Sam Abrahart, is that her name?
Yeah.
Abraham.
Yeah.
She was like one of the first people that was coming in, and I totally forgot about that. So what was that kind of process like?
This is amazing. That's so funny. Yeah, it was really fun. Where it's not active anymore, but it was such a fun like little passion project, and obviously has led me to so many other things that I've been so lucky to be able to do. So yeah, it was such a good time. We just both got so busy in our businesses, and it was like, all right, well, this was a great little
You're
COVID
something's
project.
Gotta go.
Yeah, but we need to take a step back, and Becca's growth has been amazing with Homemade Social. And I honestly can't even believe that I'm where I am right now, even.
Yeah.
Because you just come up with an idea and you're kind of a little delusional to tackle it and make it happen.
Actually do it.
Yeah. And then you're just you get the ball rolling, and it just keeps rolling. You just keep it going, and you're like, oh my God, you look back and it's like, how did I get here?
You're like, how did I get here? How did we end up here?
Yes, exactly. So,
well, I do want to talk about, you were in PR more before you opened Nikki Butler Media, right?
Yes, I was.
So how did you kind of make that switch, and what similarities do you see between the world of PR and the world of podcasting?
Yeah, having a podcast really, I've always been interested in podcasts, and then having our podcast really sparked my idea to get started, as I said. But then I was as I was really kind of coming up with our concept for what this business was going to look like, I was trying to figure out how I could marry my background and expertise in PR with podcasting. And so that's where the bookings side of our services came into play, because PR is really essentially anything that's public facing, right? It's your public facing message, how the public perceives you and what they're consuming from you. So in a traditional sense, it's newspapers and TV hits and magazines and stuff like that. But in this digital age, it's now podcasting and all of the different assets that you have that you're putting out to the world, into the public. So I really like to stretch the definition of PR these days to really fit all of these digital assets that we own that we're putting out into the world. And so with podcasting specifically, booking your guests can be a strategic PR opportunity. And so we really flex that muscle with our podcasters and really identify what our podcasters' goals are, and then go into how specific guests that we can reach out to try to get on the show can help feed into those goals. And so a lot of that has to do with, identifying people, first of all, who of course are first and foremost a fit for you. It feels aligned. You're excited about this person. I think at the end of the day, you can have as much strategy as you want, but you really have to let your true excitement come through and passion come through.
I totally agree. That reminds me, sorry to cut you off. Totally reminds me of Michael Bostic talks about this all the time. I'm a big anything Dear Media, love Dear Media. But I just remember hearing him say for years, the reason their podcast works is because they're actually curious and they're actually interested in their guests. And you can totally tell a difference if someone brings a guest on that they're they're just in my industry. They might be an okay guest, but they don't care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you might have selected that guest because they have 2 million followers on Instagram, and you're trying to leverage that audience by having them come on your show, hoping that they'll share this episode with their audience. And while that can be effective, at the end of the day, you always have to go back to really being passionate about this person, what they do, what they talk about. Oh, I just had this conversation really with a client yesterday, because they really just wanted to grow super fast. And all podcasts after launch, after a few months, they are just going to reach a plateau in analytics, and you've got to get a little creative and try to figure out how to just keep the momentum going. And we had kind of taken that approach originally with guests, is let's pick the people who are big, who are going to reach far and wide. And she had told me, she was I kind of do feel I wasn't as connected to some of these people, even though they are really big. And it's okay, well, that's red flag. We can't have that happen, So we're kind of revisiting that strategy with our guests.
Yeah. And it's if you do have someone on that has a big following, but the episode isn't amazing because you didn't connect with the guest, those people that might have listened because of that influencer, whoever you had, might not become continuous listeners just because they weren't super impressed with that one.
Exactly. That's such a good point because you might get the listeners for a single episode, but are you really going to be able to keep them if it's not
Right.
aligned? And that's the goal,
That's
is you want to gain them and keep them.
Yeah, that's kind of where we were like when we started this podcast. I think it was like who has like a big following and has been around. Obviously, we wanted people who like would make sense for the podcast, but that was a little bit more of the strategy. And now, like in the last few months, I've been talking to Terrah and I'm like, at this point, like, I don't care if you have 2,000 followers. If I can have a good conversation with you and I feel like our listeners can learn something. And then on top of that, like if they do learn something, they're probably more likely to share it or put it on their stories or whatever.
Yes.
That's like a way better growth method, I think, than like faking it with someone just because they have a big following.
Exactly. I know. I have like one of my podcasters who has a really large podcast, and she's like, some of my best interviews come from the people who don't have the social following, but they're so knowledgeable in their field and they know exactly what they're doing and they provide a lot of value. And that's super important for the listener.
Yeah, I think it's just changing like the way you view the guests and everything like that. Jumping off of that, would love to talk about really the benefits of podcasting for a business. I think this is very like a new thing that we're seeing a lot of people doing, whether it's the business starting a podcast or pitching the founder to be on podcasts as a guest. I think there's a lot of value in it, obviously. But before, I feel like it was very much like a personality. You had to be like a creator or a reality TV star or whatever. But I think it's shifted so much now. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So the great thing about podcasting compared to any other sort of outward facing platform that you're going to be on is that it's long form content. So you have the ability to get really intimate with listeners and really put like a face and a personality, a face or a voice and personality to a business. So that I personally think that like, and I know that I operate this way as a consumer and a buyer, is I want to feel connected to a brand, and that's what's going to make me buy. And I really feel like podcasting accomplishes that for businesses. So even if you don't have your own podcast or can't take on that commitment, a way that business owners can leverage podcasting is by pitching themselves to be guests on podcasts. And then you get to still take advantage of the platform and the medium without having like the full blown commitment of creating every week or however often you publish. But yeah, it's super intimate. It's long form. You can get your messages out there not in sound bites, which is really difficult to do. Like with TV and radio interviews coming from PR, we would always try to train our clients to speak in sound bites so that the more sound bites they speak in, like the more likely the edit for the TV segment or whatever is going to be used.
It's going to be like clipped a certain way. Yeah.
Yep. Whereas like if you're long-winded, they can't use that. So that's what's nice about podcasting is you can tell stories and be a little more long-winded in that way, which is great. And podcasting really just has like so many indirect forms of like ROI. And one of them, which is one of my favorites, is the ability to just connect with people that you might not otherwise connect with. So like, you can, if you're going to have guests on your podcast, you can use your podcast as an excuse to reach out to Jessica Alba and be like, I want to hear about, how you created Honest and like what your values were behind that. And like, if it really goes super well, if you're able to get her on your show, you have no idea what kind of opportunities could stem from that for the future that are outside of just interviewing her on your podcast. So I really, really love that. And it just gives everybody this connection that we've all been craving,
Yeah, that's so true. I use this podcast, like I'll admit it. I use it all the time to just talk to people that I like to follow. I literally did an interview yesterday with a girl that I was like, I selfishly like, I just love your content. Like, I just wanted to get you on here and talk. And even like same with the networking and the possibilities down the line. We interviewed a girl maybe a year ago, and she just reached out to us to see if we could do like her management as an influencer. She wanted new representation, new agents. And we're like, that never would have happened if we didn't
exactly
have
like
you on the
how
podcast.
Amazing is that? And now you're making money from your podcast. Like That's what's so amazing about podcasting is people seem to always think that like the only way to get a return on your investment is through advertising and, you know, working with brands and stuff. But you just made money off of your podcast by getting a client through outreach that you were doing for your podcast. So you completely made money there. And so I just like absolutely love that podcasting does that for people.
I love that you brought that up because that's something Terrah and I have been talking about a lot, like monetizing your podcast. Do you have any tips on that? Is that something that you work with your clients with?
Yeah, I advise them on it. We have done some like actual outreach before, but I either have like clients who are a little too small to like work with actual selling actual ad spots, but then my like larger clients work with agencies. So then agencies are doing like all of their selling for their advertising. But we do like advise on it. And I think when you are a smaller podcast and you're like, how can I at least try to make some sort of return on my investment and my time and all of this? I think you should consider like affiliate marketing. So reaching out to brands that really align with you, that you really believe in, you already use, you can give a super honest and genuine testimonial about, reach out to them, say, how can you set up a unique affiliate code for me? And I will share about it on my podcast and try to get like all of the sales for you that I possibly can. But then you get a kickback for that, whatever their program.
That's true.
You get a kickback for it. So that's a really easy way, I think, to start. Another super easy way to start is if you do have a business and your podcast is an extension of your business, this is a way for you to push and sell your own services and products and also collect emails by offering free like downloads and just talking about everything that you're doing in your business on your podcast. Because those people are already listening to your show and invested in the value that you provide. So they're more likely to take it a step further and invest in you financially as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I hear people do that all the time. I love when they're like, this episode is brought to you by, and then it's their own business. I'm like, so true. Every episode is brought to you by your own business.
Exactly. So there's a lot of ways that you can get creative with monetization. I think documenting everything, like you guys documenting the client that you just got from your show and, you know, what their monthly retainer is or whatever, like document that so you can look back and remind yourself, oh, I am making money from my podcast. It just doesn't feel as direct because I'm not selling ad space. Right.
Yeah, that's true. There's definitely other ways to make money. Back to kind of the PR, like getting, even if you don't have a podcast, like going on other podcasts, is that something that you guys offer, getting other people on other shows?
Yeah, I actually started my business this way with just this service offering, was pitching people to be on the podcast. So that was really kind of like the main way that the PR angle came into my business. We don't offer it as a standalone service right now, but we will do it for like our full concierge clients that we are booking guests for. And this is because it just feels like a natural fit to, you know, if we're reaching out to somebody who has a podcast, but we want them to come on our client's podcast, it feels like a natural fit to just be like, why don't we do a swap? You know,
I've realized that when I was doing that too, it feels much more natural to be like, you be on ours, we'll be on yours.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more of like for our full concierge clients, it's more of like an added benefit that they get because it just fits, you know, it's just more natural fit. So and trying not to like bite off more than we can chew with all of our services too. I really want to focus on the podcasters who have the podcasts as our clients and like really making that super robust.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of things like biting off too much than you can chew, that's something that we deal with constantly. Terrah and I are like, we have this idea and this idea. And we're like, okay, relax. We need to hone in on the services that we do have. Like, let's not do 9 different services. Okay. Like, let's do like 5 that we do really well. But that kind of leads me into like organizing your business. I feel like this is something we've struggled with. We like hired a girl to really help us with this and has been like such a game changer for us. But what are some tips that you have for business owners just to kind of keep everything organized, like strategies that you have to keep things organized and efficient just within your business?
This is like an ongoing thing, like it never really feels like it's fully done. And I certainly could be implementing a lot more things, but I know that like with us, we have so many lists and like information databases that we create. So I use for that like a platform called Airtable, which is really great. It's like, I mean, it can operate like a Google Sheet, but it's just more interactive. You can filter much easier. And it helps us keep track of all of our like pitch dates too. So it's like, we'll have a column for initial pitching and then like 5-day follow-up, 7-day follow-up, like 12-day follow-up, what we do, which is super helpful. That's probably was the most difficult thing to figure out how to get organized because, we're pitching hundreds of people a week across all of our clients. And so that was amazing. We use ClickUp for task management and time tracking. So I track time in my business, and this is so crucial for service-based businesses is track your time for all of the tasks that you're doing under each client. So get specific about those tasks so you can see like where all of your time is going. For us, like with pitching, with audio production, with copywriting, with like just managing the calendars and the episode release schedules. So really getting specific about that so you can see how much time your team as a whole is spending on a specific client and then where within that client's account the time is really being allotted. I like had to have a difficult conversation yesterday with a client because they just tend to like require a ton of our time, and our contract had come up. So I was like, perfect timing. This is a great opportunity for me to propose like a monthly retainer increase to cover all of these man hours that we're putting into their account. So having that visibility into your business like that is the only way that you're going to know if you're profitable.
Yeah. So we've kind of had that discussion too, like in the last like probably few months. We've started like tracking time. I love that you have a software, like a thing that will help you keep that organized, because we just kind of write it out in like a notes thing. But it's helpful to be like, okay, this is how much I'm spending on this client, and they're paying the same amount as maybe this other client, but I'm spending 10 more hours a week on this one, but they're paying the same. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you're just, that's, it's a struggle for me because I'm more the creative. I'm not like the great business owner. And this is like where becoming a good business owner comes into play. But yeah, another thing too on the organization note is like establishing workflows and making sure everybody is aware of them and how they work.
Yeah.
And the way that I really like to do this is through Loom videos. I don't know if you've ever used Loom.
Mm-mm.
It is like the best because it just shares your screen and you literally just show how you do something. And so you can build that into like a whole like statement or like a standard operating procedure, SOP.
Yeah.
And then it just shows your team how to do something. So you don't have to, because I struggle so much with delegation, and I'm like, I'll just do it myself. Like, I don't want to explain it. It's going to take too long. So I'll just do it myself. But now I've started to really embrace the mindset of like, okay, well, I will do it myself, but I'm going to do it myself this one time, and I'm going to record it on this Loom video and just talk through it on the video. And then I've got that. I can send it off to my team and they take it over from there. And
that's so easy. I think that's like a lot of the things you're saying. I'm like, I think that's just an entrepreneurial thing, like especially the creative thing. It's funny that you're talking about this because we just had a conversation this morning about like how we need to organize things, like everything from like finances to we're like bringing on a new employee, fingers crossed, hopefully this week.
Yay.
And so all of that kind of stuff. But I think usually people that start businesses are like, because they love this service or the product or whatever it is, like that's why they get into it, right? So for example, Terrah still loves doing social media and loves the creative and loves like specifically the photography and stuff. But as you grow your business, she has all of this like admin stuff and whatever. And that's the part that doesn't come natural to most people.
Yeah.
So how have you kind of taught yourself like that side of things, the admin, the taxes, the like the boring business side of things that most people don't want?
Yes. Well, I hate struggle with this stuff every day, but I try to outsource what I really don't understand, because
Yeah.
you don't want to mess with like the IRS or
No,
anything like
literally.
that.
I'm like, that's why I have people do my taxes. And I'm not a
Yeah.
business, but I'm scared of it.
Yes. So like outsource what you really don't know and really don't understand so that it's just done
Yeah.
right. I think this kind of ties back to like something I've really learned since starting a business and becoming a business owner is like, take yourself seriously right from the start. Like I did
Yeah.
not do that. I was like, oh, I have this idea. Like this will be so fun and like so cute.
Yeah.
All this, and like would get my clients work on the client work, all this stuff. But I didn't like set up my EIN right away. I didn't open a business bank account right away. I was just like
Yeah.
testing the waters, unsure, which I think is a terrible mindset to be in if you're really, really wanting to like have a business and grow a business and make a lot of money from it. And so I also too didn't like, I think it's super important to hire an attorney to do your contracts for you, like contracts between you and your clients, you and contractors you might hire, or you and employees that you might hire, because
Yeah.
they need to be so ironclad that
We've noticed that even with like influencers, like the influencers that we do for influencer marketing, like we'll miss something and they'll be like, actually, you cannot repost that or you can't do whatever. It's been like past 30 days. So you're not allowed to use. And we're like, damn it, our contracts weren't good.
yes, it's so crazy. Like I have truly come to understand that the contract is really the clarity and like the driving force behind your partnership with anybody. And
Yeah.
it's your fallback when lines start to blur. And
Yeah.
I've like have gone through a recent experience like dealing with like a contractual thing.
Yeah.
And because my contract had certain things in there that this person was trying to breach, essentially, it's like, well, you got to reference back to the contract and it's there and they signed it and I countersigned it. And so that's what you go by. Like, because
Yeah.
lines start to get blurred, the contract is what's going to make it clear again.
Yeah. Especially within service-based businesses, like it's really easy to get into a gray area. Which
sure.
actually, I do want to talk to you a little bit about. I love to talk about boundaries within like work.
Yes.
And I think they're so, so important, especially in a service-based business. How have you been able to like set boundaries with your clients? Like, is it something that you do like right away as soon as you sign them on? Or, how do you do that and how do you uphold them?
Yeah. So I was like terrible at this in the beginning because I'm like, oh, I want to be there for my clients. And like,
as most people are.
Yeah. And like, so I'm like, you can text me, like, just whenever you want, I'll get to it, like, as soon as possible. And it's not sustainable. It's not good for your mental health. And I have like 2 little kids now. And so I'm super protective of like the time that I have with them, because I was trying to like work and like be with them at the same time. And you just can't multitask. I don't think it's actually a possibility for anybody in this world.
I just said that the other day. I was like, it's not a real thing. Something is falling behind when you're trying to multitask.
Exactly. It's impossible. And I thought that I could do it all. So I actually have written in boundaries into my contracts. So like hours when we are available and forms of communication. So no texting anymore. I have like the exception of like one client. But then, no texting. Everything has to be like either via email or we have Slack channels with our clients.
Yeah.
So that's where they can communicate with us. And then I have like a response time in there. So like it'll take us I don't know what it is, but like 24 hours or something to respond, or 36 hours to respond to something. Because one thing that is also difficult is reminding clients that you are a contractor for them. You are not an employee. So
That's so true. We struggle with that too. Speaking of, how do you remind them of that? Like, how do you delicately tell them, like, I still have other clients?
Yes, it's hard to do. I literally did it yesterday. And so at the beginning of the partnership, of course, I review all of these things. Like, one thing I think that's so important to do, because people don't read contracts. So pull out those things that are really important that you want to make sure that they understand in your day-to-day contact and relationship with them. So like, pull it out in an email and just say, like, here's some highlights from the contract. Let me know if you have any questions about it. And then revisit things as needed. Like, if a client is calling you or saying something is urgent at 8 o'clock at night and you need to fix it and do it, but depending on how urgent it actually is, remind them, like, hey, this is outside of our working office hours. I will get to it first thing in the morning tomorrow. Obviously, given that it can wait, depending on how serious the urgency.
I always tell my clients, like, I have a work phone now, which has been the biggest game changer.
Nice.
But it's literally the nicest thing ever. But I'm always, even with my interns, I'll be like, email me. If it is an emergency, shouldn't be an emergency, but God forbid if it's an emergency, then you can text me. But even then, it's like on my work phone, so it might take me 4 hours to get to it. Sorry, you can call me too, but
yeah. And it's kind of like the same thing with email. Like, I have to have time carved out to like go through my email, because it just gets so bogged down right now. And it's because I get all of these pitches from people, or responses from.
You do a lot through your email, so that would make sense.
Yes. So I have to literally carve out time. Otherwise, if I look at it and I get emails, like, my attention will immediately go straight to the email. I'm like, oh crap, I've got to do that. And then it takes me away from like creative work or focus on that stuff,
That's exactly what I say all the time, and why I honestly have most things on Do Not Disturb. I kind of operate my phone and my email in the same way, where I'm like, I have to allot time. It's usually like first thing in the morning, and then maybe like once at noon, once like right before I clock out for the day. But I say that all the time, because if I start reading everything, it's going to take me 3 hours to take a task that should only take me like 30 minutes.
Exactly. So it's such a constant struggle between creative work and really focusing on that, and then doing like all of your admin email type stuff.
Yeah. Last kind of question on like the business side of things. I do want to talk about hiring. I feel like I've been talking about this a lot with small business owners, but you seem like the most similar structure wise to us. How have you gone about hiring? Because we have like been through the ringer with hiring. Like, it's quite difficult to find people that align with you, especially as a small business.
It is probably my least favorite thing, is doing the hiring, the interviewing, and then managing people on top of that. Once you've done the hiring, is so hard too. Like, that's probably like my biggest struggle. But in terms of like finding people, I've really just leveraged my friends like in the business community to help me out with posting on social media or something, because I truly value references and referrals.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to go through, which I have before, like somebody who I don't really have any kind of like third-party validation for, because I don't know anything about them. I don't know their intentions, like, and how that is. But I've also as well done postings on LinkedIn, which is really effective. Yeah. And I think it targets the right people. Like, I've gotten really good results from it, and not people who are, there's some in that kind of like fall through the cracks that are totally not at all qualified.
We just did a LinkedIn post and had like 690 responses, and we were like,
holy cow, that's a lot.
We need to reel it in. It was insane.
So I think you can like like put settings to where it like I know for me, I was like, I want this person to be here in Arizona because I don't want to deal with any sort of like legal things
that's
happen.
kind of a thing that we've been dealing with. Everybody's remote on the team. And I think this new girl that we're about to bring on is like the last state that we're adding tax wise. And then from there, it's like, you can be remote, but you have to be in one of these 4 states because everyone has different laws and taxes and whatever.
Yes.
That's something that we've kind of run into recently.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. So like I do prefer to hire in my own state. And also I like that as well because it opens us up for the opportunity to actually meet in person. So I meet with like kind of like my right-hand girl every Tuesday. And I think it helps with just the camaraderie a little bit and like the ability to just kind of work together collaboratively. And she can kind of get into my mind a little bit more about like where I'm at with the business and what I'm like working on and what I'm like hoping for in like the near future and stuff like that. So I think that's like helpful with her or any team members kind of mentality about the job too, but it's still very flexible and very remote as well.
Yeah. It's just been, I think it's just been like hard, especially I think the added level of being a small business where you really need somebody who's like committed and invested and is willing to be invested in your business versus I always tell people like on interviews, I always say like the first thing that I say is if you're the type of employee that just wants to clock in, clock out, get their money and leave, this probably isn't the role for you. Or if you want like insane structure or like 2 tasks that you do every day, this isn't going to be it for you.
I had to figure that out like the hard way because I hired somebody like that and like they just kind of were waiting around for me to like tell them what to do. And I'm like, no, I need people who take initiative. Like that's how I always was as an employee in my like past jobs. And so that's what I expect. And I also just don't have like the leadership skills yet to really like
well, and it's hard too if you don't have like a ton of departments. You know what I mean? If you're like, you have a certain tasks, but at the end of the day, like you kind of need someone who's willing to build with you. And it's just harder as a small business, right? Because you kind of need people who are willing to wear a few different hats.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's like the job description, you can get as descriptive as possible. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be a little bleeding into some other areas for sure.
Yeah.
But absolutely. People and hiring is absolutely my least favorite, the most hardest thing I've done in this business.
Kind of glad to hear it because we were like, this has been like the worst. It's been like 2 months. We like had a girl and then it didn't work out with her. And so we had to go through the whole process again. And it was just,
I know
it's a lot.
Really rough. Yeah. Like you really don't, like, I kind of look back and I'm like, I wish my employers were like treated me a little bit more like a value because I gave a shit about my jobs and like the work that I did.
That's also funny you bring that up because that's something we just talked about this morning. Like we realized we have to, if we want someone to invest in us and grow with us and value us, we have to make sure that this team member feels valued as soon as they come on board and as they start to work with us and build with us, like they have to feel valued. Otherwise they're not going to stay and they're not going to be committed.
Totally. It's so important to like express that to your employees for sure. It's really hard to find good people.
That's what I have found to be insane to me. Kind of like you, I've always like, I kind of like working. I feel like I just would be bored if I didn't work. And I was always like, I've said this a few times on the podcast, I think, but even when I had like minimum wage jobs in high school, I would always get like, oh, you're such a good employee, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, literally all I do is show up on time and do my job. But it has then like, since I've started interviewing and we've started hiring, it has dawned on me that not everybody can do that. Like do their job and show up on time. And to me, I was always like, that's common sense. Like that's just, you're just doing what you were hired to do.
Don't get it. I don't understand like the mentality. I don't know if it's like a generational thing or what the deal is, but
then you find people who are really awesome that are like go above and beyond. It's just like, it was just shocking to me that not everybody was like that.
Yes, I totally agree with you.
Okay, so kind of switching back to podcasting, I would love to know just like some of your thoughts on what the future of podcasting holds. Like, where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge, huge money generator in advertising, of course. I will say it did not reach the like monetary level that everybody thought that it was going to in 2022. It kind of like it was lower, it didn't reach like the
Interesting.
large, yeah. But I don't really think that that's like a huge indicator of like a decline in advertising on podcasts. I
Yeah.
definitely think that's here to stay. But I think podcasters should be treated as like the same way we treat social media influencers and content creators.
Yeah.
Like it really is essentially the same exact thing, just a different medium.
Yeah.
So if you're a brand or you're a podcaster, like sell your like create packages for what you have to offer. If you have a really great podcast that has a decent amount of reach, obviously add that into your package and then sweeten it with like some social media posts and Instagram stories or a reel or a
Yeah.
TikTok, like whatever, or an opportunity to like for this brand or whoever you're working with to like be in your newsletter or, just kind of
Yeah.
creating these robust little packages and putting it together in a brief media kit is really smart to do, because if your podcast doesn't have like enough downloads per episode yet to sell just that, then adding in all these other elements where there's more
True.
reach is super compelling to some brands,
Yeah.
especially brands
That's
who
such a
do
good
have
idea.
a smaller budget. So like you can be that. Don't think that advertising on podcasts is just like these brands have like endless budgets. There are small businesses out
Right.
there who want to take advantage of it and put ads on podcasts, but they don't have the big budget. So if you don't have the big numbers, then that's a match made in heaven. Like find those brands
It's
that
kind
are
of the same thing as like with micro influencers. Just because you don't have 100,000 followers, like you can find smaller businesses that are willing to work with you with 5,000 or 10,000 followers or, whatever it is.
Exactly. Like you can still play that same game that all these big podcasters and big brands are playing, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I
I
love
know
that.
there's definitely people who think podcasting is oversaturated now. Like let's say there's people listening that are like, I would love to start a podcast, but
Mhm.
like you hear it all the time. Everyone's like, everybody and their mother has a podcast. What would
Everything
you
is
say to that?
oversaturated. Like
Yeah.
literally everything is oversaturated. And like if you're going to let that deter you from starting something that has really been weighing on your mind, like a podcast, for example, you're there. You're missing the boat. Like you're missing the boat anyway. It's just going to get more and more oversaturated. But I will say one thing about podcasting that's really interesting is there's like over, well, I don't know how many podcasts there are. Let's just say 2 billion podcasts that are published, right?
Yeah.
But the numbers continue. I wish I had this little graph that I could talk about and speak from. But as you like bring in all these other factors, the number of actual podcasts that are active and publishing, it
Mhm.
comes down to like a million or something
It's
crazy. So,
crazy how many will get started. And then I read something that like a lot of podcasts don't even make it past 10 episodes.
yes, yeah. They oftentimes, I feel like at 10 episodes, and let's just call that 10 weeks if you're publishing once a week, that's when kind of like the excitement and the luster from your launch dies down and you're
Yeah.
not getting all this good feedback and numbers maybe are plateauing a little bit. And you're like, why am I doing this? What a waste of time. But
Yeah.
podcasting, like anything else, I truly believe is the long game. And like you have to be fully invested, fully dedicated, and you just have to persevere. And it's like you have to have the, what is it, the stamina or the, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like anything. It's just like even launching a business. Like you're not going to see the revenue that you wanted to see in 2 months. Like you
Yeah.
obviously have to keep going.
Yeah. And kind of like tying this into the like forecasting like trends of podcasting is, adding the video element could make it a little bit more fun and engaging if you're only doing audio. And that's obviously, I truly just think like we all have to be doing video podcasts because it gives you the content for social. You can monetize
it's so helpful
on YouTube. Yeah, it's so helpful. And it doesn't have to be rocket science. Like, don't think that you have to have this beautiful studio with all this lighting. And
that's literally kind of why we didn't do it for a while, because we were recording remote. And then we were like, you know what? Who cares?
You'd be so
also, to be honest, like I put it up on the TV while I'm working. Like half the time I'm not even looking at it.
Yes. And you'd be so surprised like how forgiving it is. And it's actually more forgiving to add the video element because now the listener is using multiple senses. So whereas like with just audio podcasting, they're only using their ears, right? So it's super heightened. They can probably hear a little bit more than they can when watching and listening to a video. So I think you have a lot more like leeway with some little like editing hiccups or whatever it might be. And then I'll say like the last thing or the last couple things with like kind of trending stuff is our subscriptions and creating subscription-based content. We're obviously seeing that on Instagram, as I'm sure you know. And it's definitely a very real thing with podcasting, but it comes with other challenges and commitments, right? Because now you have to try to figure out how to differentiate your subscription-based content from your free content, which I think is the biggest challenge. And then just like focusing on community. I really think podcasts have such a great ability to create community and
absolutely
bring people together.
Yeah, love that. So true too, because sounds like it feels like someone's in your ear half the time. So it's like hard not to feel connected.
Yes.
Last thing I want to talk about before I let you go, 1-800-podcast. Would love for you to just give us the whole spiel, what it is, why you decided to work on it, just anything you want to talk about it.
Yes. So me and two of my fellow business owning girlfriends were wanting to offer like an in-person live event where they could come. It was like more of a workshop. So they could come prepared with all of these things that we would give them. And then they would essentially leave with all of the assets you need to launch your podcast, because launching seems to be a big barrier, right? So that's how it started.
Absolutely.
And then we were like, okay, well, this live in-person situation just feels really physically daunting. Like a lot of energy would have to be put into it. And it just didn't feel aligned. It didn't feel right. So we shifted and we turned it into a podcast course. So we've created this online course. It's got an insane amount of helpful resources. Like we really are putting an emphasis more on the resources than the actual video modules. So that's what I love about it. And it's just been so much fun. So we're going to launch that in August. Be on the lookout. I don't have a set date, but it will be August. And then we're also launching a whole community around it too. So there will be a supporting podcast to go alongside of it that will have like 5 to 15 minute podcast episodes answering a question from a listener. So we're kind of like doing a play on that like 1-800 podcast thing and like having people dial in and leave like a voicemail and then we answer it in a podcast episode. So that's coming. And then just really kind of cultivating a community around it and connecting people together who are in the thick of launching a podcast or trying to like get their numbers up on their podcast, whatever it might be. And just being able to connect people together to help each other out while also being a resource for them too.
I love that. That's such a good idea. And you're so right. The launch is really, I think, what holds so many people back. I think there's so many people that are like, I would love to start a podcast. Don't know where to start. Don't know how to do it. Or they think it's a big investment, right? They think I have to buy like, all the audio equipment and like a nice microphone. And it's like, no, you could do it on your computer if you wanted. Like if you just wanted to launch,
Exactly. Yeah, you really could. And so we provide like all of that, like how to set up your equipment, like a whole shopping list for you if you wanted. But we also detail as well, like, I just always want people to know that they shouldn't make it more complicated than it needs to be. You just need to like
Yeah.
get started, and then everything else is going to start to fall into place. And just having your podcast out there and consistently publishing on it is going to end up taking on a mind of its own and morphing into something completely different than you originally set out for it to be, which is a good thing because you're getting more clarity on your own commitment to the podcast, your processes, what your listeners want to see. And so hopefully we can help out with everybody on that journey.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I loved all of that. Nikki, where can everybody find you?
So you can follow me on Instagram at the Nikki Butler, NIKKIBUTLER. And then you can follow my business on Instagram at Nikki Butler Media. Website is nikkibutlermedia.com. And yeah, be on the lookout for all of the fun things.
Gorgeous. Well, thank you so much, Nikki, for being on. Loved this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed listening, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.